Weather is about to change a lot as we go into the end of October, where we are going to have a large trough ejection over the Rocky Mountains that'll bring the potential for severe weather and also colder weather as we go into early November. In addition to that, we are also watching the tropics very closely because in about 8 to 9 days from now, we could have our next tropical cyclone or hurricane develop in the Caribbean Sea. Let's begin with what's happening across the lower 48 right now and across the tropics. First thing I want to point out is that this right here is the remnants of what we had with Oscar only a few days ago, which made landfall in Cuba as a Category 1 hurricane. That is no longer a tropical cyclone. It is continuing to move to the northeast just past Bermuda and will continue to move out to sea over the next few days. But notice the Caribbean Sea. We are looking at a very quiet pattern right now where there is no convection there. But as we go into the very tail end of this month, we do have reason to believe that we could see our next tropical cyclone or hurricane develop. That even could go towards Florida, might even go out to sea, could go more to the east. There's a lot of scenarios, and we're going to talk more about that here in just a few minutes. And then across the lower 48, nothing really crazy happening right now. However, there is going to be a sneaky severe weather event today across parts of the Central Plains due to a shortwave trough that is moving across the central and northern plains, and we'll be talking more about that here in just a couple of minutes. Now let's talk more about the weather pattern that'll be impacting the United States over the next couple of weeks, and to look at that, we'll look at the jet stream. For right now, we have a very zonal jet stream, and what that essentially means is that there's not really any curvature. It's very flat line. Usually when we see stuff like this, a lot of warm air gets trapped to the south of the jet stream, and then north is where the cold air is sitting. And so anywhere north basically of the United States and Canada border is where most of the cold air resides right now. For the most part, the entire country is dealing with above average temperatures. With that said, a very small feature that you might not see is this little shortwave trough, and that's going to play a factor into today's weather and tomorrow's across the central plains in the Midwest, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment, as severe weather will be a possibility. As we go into the weekend and into next week, things are going to remain very consistent with what we're going to see over, the next couple of days, where the jet stream is still going to remain very zonal. But as we go into the early to mid portion of next week, that is when we're going to start to see a dip in the jet stream. That is going to cause more of a meridional jet stream pattern, which means that we're going to eventually see a cold blast, especially across the Pacific Northwest. We also could see some atmospheric river events across the west coast this weekend, which will bring several inches of rainfall. On the flip side of things, a ridge will continue to dominate with warm air across much of the Great Plains and then back through the northeast and as well as back through the southeast. When things really get interesting will be during the middle and end of next week. That is because we're at least going to have one trough ejection across the Rocky Mountains, which will help to kind of basically mix the cold and warm air together. That should allow for at least 1 or 2 days of severe weather across parts of the central and southern plains, perhaps even as far east as the Midwest. This is by Thursday and a Friday. Notice how the GFS model has another trough right behind that one, which is actually does look a bit more impressive, a negatively tilted trough as we go into Friday and Saturday. If we have something like this, this will be able to produce a more significant threat, I think, of severe weather. So something to watch for. Keep in mind, though, that this is still about 7 to 10 days out from now, so things could definitely change. However, the long-term models are indicating that our weather is going to become a lot more active as we go into the very tail end of this month and into early November. And eventually, as we get closer to the following week, which is near Election Day, things do become a lot more uncertain. But I do want to point out that the GFS model does show a tropical cyclone in the Gulf of Mexico as we go into the early part of November. But again, that is still over 10 days from now. A lot of things could change, but we'll be talking more about that possibility here in just a few minutes. I do want to show you the height anomalies. What this will kind of give you an idea of is meteorologically what we're going to be seeing in the mid to upper levels. And this is a big thing that we're going to be looking at by the middle and end of next week, is this big blob of blue air, essentially meaning colder temperatures aloft. And what that's essentially going to do is be our kind of dividing line here in the middle where our low pressure system is going to try to go through. So we are likely to see a trough move more throughout parts of the central United States as we go into the middle and end of next week. And you'll see on the future radar in a moment what we're actually talking about here. And then by the weekend, we could even have another storm right behind that. So there's a possibility that we get maybe 2 different trough ejections next week, which means possibly 2 different big storms. So this is what we're looking at through the weekend. Not really much happening across the country. High pressure dominating at the surface, keeping things warm and dry across the eastern tier of the country. Atmospheric rivers will bring rain and snow to the west coast. That'll dump a few inches of rain back over in parts of Washington, Oregon, as well as California. By the time we go into the middle of the week, we're at least going to get 1 trough ejection. That one does not look very impressive, but it should bring some rain to areas like the Midwest and back through the Central Plains, which, by the way, those areas do do need rain, so this will help the drought situation that they're in. As we go into Wednesday into Thursday, we'll eventually have our next trough injection attempt to make its way across the Rocky Mountains, and you'll see this by the weekend. We are likely to get a relatively large storm to develop back over in the central and northern plains. Depending on how much moisture there is and instability, this could end up being a multi-day severe weather event. Right now, the GFS model is pushing this very far off to the north, which means that this could be a dual threat. We could actually have some snow in the northern plains, which again, this is still over 7 days out, so this detail is very uncertain, but there might be some snow. There also could even be some severe weather on the eastern side of that trough, and this is very far to the north, by the way, for early November standards, so that'll be something to watch for. And then as we go throughout the weekend and into the following week, this could continue to be a severe weather maker and a rain maker from the southern plains all the way back through parts of the Midwest. But honestly, again, there's a lot of uncertain points with this. We are likely going to see a large storm. The question remains, where will we see severe weather? Will we see snow? And exactly where is all this actually going to happen here across the United States? We're not really sure yet, but we do think that there will be some sort of large storm by the beginning of November, if not even at the very tail end of this month. And then the GFS model also showing a hurricane over 300 hours from now, which again, there's really no science in forecasting this. You might be seeing some clickbait, titles or videos on YouTube today showing a big hurricane in Florida. As we go into early November, I just want to let you know that that is not something that we are currently forecasting. Nothing's even developed yet. There is a possibility for that, but it is a very low chance right now. We'll talk more about that again here in just a moment. Here's what the instability looks like as we go into the middle and end of next week. So notice the instability access on Wednesday and Thursday, mostly from the Midwest back through the southern plains. So any sort of trough that moves across the Great Plains will be more favored to producing severe weather in these areas on Thursday. Notice by Friday into Saturday, though, that instability really shoots off to the north. So we could see severe weather in a very elongated area, anywhere from Minnesota back into Texas. And then eventually, as we go into the following week, that instability is basically fizzling out. So we'll probably at least have some level of severe weather. Again, will it be an outbreak? We don't really know right now. The temperatures over the next several days will continue to stay very warm for most of the country. Record-breaking high temperatures will be a possibility, especially in the Midwest as we go into early next week. Eventually, by later into next week, the warm air continues. Not nearly as warm, though, as what we'll see on Monday into Tuesday. Still above average temperatures, and look at the below average temperatures on the West Coast. Nice weather for this time of the year. Eventually, into next weekend, things will become more uncertain, but again, we're probably going to continue to see above average temperatures east of the Rocky Mountains. Here's the latest Climate Prediction Center outlook for temperatures as we go into the end of this month into early November. Very likely, we're going to see above average temperatures east of the Rocky Mountains, and then west of the Rocky Mountains, we are going to see below to potentially well below temperatures over in those areas. So enjoy the cooler weather if you're back over to the west. Also, I do want to point out that there is a risk of severe weather today, mainly across the central plains. We are going to be watching for storm initiation right around or just after sunset. There is a low chance that we go live later today, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live. But really, the main concern will be hail across parts of Missouri, southern Iowa, and northeast Kansas. However, if storms somehow are able to be a bit more supercellular initially, we actually could see an isolated tornado, so we're going to keep a close eye on that. But for right now, mostly a wind and hail threat during the mid to late evening and into the overnight hours. This will just weaken into a mainly just showers and some isolated rumbles of thunder as that moves into the direction of the Midwest. I do have some very good news. For right now, over the next 7 days, there are no tropical cyclones expected to develop in the Atlantic Ocean. However, after 7 days from now, things could very easily change, and we're going to talk all about that here over the next couple of minutes. So to begin with, the global hazards outlook over the next few weeks does indicate that there is at least a medium chance of tropical cyclone development in the Caribbean Sea. Where exactly a tropical cyclone would go here in the Caribbean Sea is very unknown right now, but we do think that there is a high likelihood, or at least I would say there's a high likelihood, that we will see some sort of tropical cyclone development in the Caribbean Sea as we go into early or mid-November. So that is what we need to watch for very closely. It's a very favorable environment with high oceanic heat content and very low wind shear, so that should be able to favor tropical cyclone development. Now, this is the bad news. The GEFS ensemble members, which have been very accurate this season, at least predicting where cyclones could develop long-term, is currently indicating as we go closer to Halloween that we are eventually going to start to see a potential tropical cyclone develop, at least some sort of low-pressure center in the Caribbean Sea by about October 30th. Now, granted, that is still 6 days from now, so things could easily change and nothing's developed yet. However, the GEFS ensemble members are essentially showing that there is a pretty high likelihood that we're going to see tropical cyclone development development as we get closer to Halloween or just after Halloween. Now, from there, if something develops, where could it go? Well, right now, the Ensemble members are showing a very large spread in both intensity and as well as where this system could go. Anywhere from literally the southwestern Atlantic Ocean to as far west as the Yucatan Peninsula. But the majority of them are currently near Cuba or near the Dominican Republic as we get closer to November 3rd. And then after that, where does this go? About half of them currently bringing it towards the northwestern Caribbean Sea and eventually towards Florida, while the other half are going out to the Atlantic Ocean. We don't know what's going to happen yet. It's too early to tell, but if more things do develop with this over the next day or two, we are going to have a dedicated video on this, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified with that latest video. Speaking of Halloween, we only have 7 more days until our 500,000 subscriber merch is gone forever, so if you want a hat, sticker, or anything like that, you can pick it up at shopmaxvelocity.net. It is the top link in the description below.